All right. So we are going to be talking about the second part of the Industrial Revolution or the second Industrial Revolution. Um, and oh yeah, and again before we start, some fun facts. I mean, my absolute favorite national park is actually Grand Teton, and followed closely by Glacier and Olympic. Those are my one, two, three in that order. So there's a fun fact for you. Grand Teton in Wyoming. Been there one time. It was amazing. If you ever get the opportunity, incredible. So, all right, let's start going in a little bit to the second industrial revolution. So, we've been talking mostly when we talk about the industrial revolution. We're mostly talking about Great Britain because of like the impact that they felt, how they benefited so much from it. If you go onto my website, I just put a video up there that talks about like why Great Britain. We mentioned this earlier in some of my other videos, like why they got lucky geographically. But go onto my website and watch that if you would like. It's really interesting. But specifically going out to the U.S., like industry grows massive after the Civil War. So after 1865 is over, industry becomes a thing in the U.S. Um, they are by the beginning of the First World War, the U.S. is an industrial power. Prior to the Civil War, the U.S. is still kind of a backwater country. It's like not a major player, but once this happens, once the U.S. figures this figure out and Civil War ends, they have a lot of resources, right? The U.S. has a ton of resources, a ton of land, untapped potential, um, and they really start to like play a major part, especially in the earliest 20th century. Um, and vast majority of the manufacturing, well, I shouldn't say vast majority, but a significant portion of the manufactured goods. And why is this? Government plays a huge role. Production, like mass production, when we talk about the Henry Ford and his big impact, and then a culture of consumption. So consumer culture, buying materials, buying goods, buying as a whole. So some big impacts, and we're going to talk about is telegraph and telephone later on. So telegraph initially, telephone, increased communication, right? So you can make decisions a lot quicker instead of having to send a letter and it takes weeks to get there. Then the decision's made and it takes weeks to get back. You can find out almost instantaneously how to change your production, how to change where you're selling, how to change anything instantaneously. And then the next is your Bessemer process, lowers the cost of steel. Um, I can't exactly tell you what the Bessemer process is. Like, I don't know the scientific reasons behind it or exactly what, but basically, it's lowering the cost of steel. Steel is king, right? You can't have skyscrapers without steel. You can't have um, your trains without steel. Like steel is going to be a major component, and this process, which lowers the cost of it, is huge. And then electricity, right? So not only having reliable power, but also like electricity, which you are able to start powering things with, making it a lot easier. So you're not constrained by like your quote unquote like people power, like manpower, how much can someone do, but now it's like machine, how much can a machine produce reliably. So businesses are getting, let's move my head. Oh, I'll put it right next to them. Look at me. All right, so businesses grow larger, right? So you have integration, so horizontally versus vertically. So horizontally is like basically if you control everything about one process. So for instance, it would be like if Google bought every other tech company and they owned all of tech, or like they owned all the steel production companies across the world or the United States at the very least. So if you need steel to do your business, you have to talk to one company, and basically you have a monopoly on that process or that product, And because you have a monopoly, you're able to charge whatever you want. Because if someone needs that to do their business, they have to talk to you. So, or you do vertical integration, and basically you from raw materials all the way through distribution, you own the process. So that way you can reduce costs all the way down. So like you own the lumber fields, and then you own the mines for the steel, and so then you own the facilities that smelts the steel, and then you own the rail. So like you can do it vertically or horizontally. I hope that makes sense. If that doesn't make sense, you can again send me messages. I sent out a survey, but basically those are the two ways that you can, if you do it right, you're able to have massive profits while reducing costs. Um, and those are basically the two rules of thumb. So like you have a bunch of people in the United States, well not a bunch of people, but you have some people in the United States at this point in time that are doing this. And there's two ideas. They're either like, if you dislike it, they're called robber barons. Basically, they're stealing and they're doing it in a corrupt way, or they're called captains of industry, which is more of a positive light. Like, oh, they're doing this and creating all these jobs and helping produce. So there's one or two. I'm sure you've heard of them. Rockefeller is one of them. Andrew Carnegie, Vanderbilt, like the school. Yeah, Vanderbilt's another one. And there's tons of these people, and they all are dominating one specific industry or one specific segment of that industry, and they're making incredible amounts of money off of this. So again, if you and this is kind of oversimplified in a way, but basically if you're horizontally, you're controlling a specific segment. So that's, again, that if you're only focusing on steel, you're controlling every single steel. Or if you're oil refineries, you're controlling every single oil refinery in the entire nation. So all the oil has to go through you. Versus your vertical integration, which is like from start to finish, you have control of it. You don't have to uh, buy it through a lumber company to get your lumber. Like, you have the lumber. So again, if you need to go back to that. So and monopolies are going to be, one business is in control of everything. They have the ability to take basically take anything and charge the price that they want to charge, and they're able to exert a ton of pressure on other companies. So AT&T, well, it used to be called Bell, and it was considered a monopoly, and it got broken into Verizon, AT&T, and all those. So that's actually like a good example of something that was considered monopoly, and it was broken up by antitrust laws, which were passed to prevent monopolies, because monopolies aren't exactly great for consumers. They're great if you own the company, but they're not great for consumers. So move my head right there. All right. So they controlled one kind of business. They allowed them to set prices. So yeah, I mean, I've already kind of touched on this. And if I was in charge of a company that owned all the oil refineries, like, why not create your business model to increase profits, right? So that's something that's going to be beneficial to you if you want to make money. If you want to increase your command over that market, you're going to try to force other companies out of business, because then everyone has to go through business use. Government wasn't regulating this behavior in the 1800s, really, and so it wasn't illegal to do this. So if it wasn't illegal to do this, why not do it? Right? That's what the business people were thinking. Okay, if it's not illegal, I can do it and help my business out. Every other business is doing this, so why not? And so this is one of the common critiques of laissez-faire capitalism, is like, well, if you let businesses do whatever you want to do, basically, and the government doesn't intervene, then basically you're setting yourself up for a bunch of monopolies that are going to negatively affect the regular consumer, your regular individual that needs to buy all these goods. Um, Now, again, the other side of the coin as well, eventually supply and demand will sort itself out, and the consumer will end up being benefited. Um, so obviously Darwin had that his theory of evolution, but social Darwinism is like basically the best run businesses are eventually going to be led by the most capable people, and the most capable people is basically that the business that ends up being the last one is the one that should be, because it's run by the best people, it's run by the most capable, it has the best product, and it's giving consumers the best bang for their buck. And so it's saying social Darwinism essentially saying, well, the strong will survive and the weak won't. Um, in reality, it's not. In reality, it's because there's some flaws to that and bribery takes place. Um, it doesn't necessarily come to fruition. Government people are power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So basically, yeah, social Darwinism could work in a vacuum, but because people are going to, especially governmental people that make decisions, can be swayed by money. Uh, these people that are in charge of these monopolies are bribing politicians to vote in their favor to continue them to be in charge. So it's problematic. Here's like a political cartoon that talks about it. If you This is basically the Senate, and so all these people around the outside, you can see Steel Beam Trust, Copper Trust, Standard and Oil Trust. It's a company, right? And so basically, what these big, bloated, fat people around the outside are showing you is they're the ones actually in charge. They have all the money. They these people around here are the ones influencing the senators to make their decision to write their legislation for their own benefit. So this is basically just saying, yeah, it's not really, in reality, it's not beneficial. And the people that actually run it are the again, robber barons, captains of industry. It's the people in charge of the monopolies. Um, so moving on to some of your assembly lines and scientific management, what we have here is when we're talking about Henry Ford and Frederick Taylor, we're talking about like the some of this is going to be super important because prior to this, it was one person's. It would be like one person making a car from start to finish. So you have to know everything about everything with cars. Like, and I don't know anything about cars really, besides the fact that like you should have brakes and an engine for the most part. But it would be like they have to make it from start to finish, so they have to know how to do everything with a car. That takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort. However, if you do like your assembly line, you don't have to know anything about, you only have to know about one specific thing and know how to do one thing. So if you get that, you get really good at it. So it reduces your time to create the product. So if you reduce your time and you reduce your labor costs, you're able to create more. So it's more profit. So this is really beneficial in terms of like reducing the cost of goods. So more people are able to benefit from it. And again, we've talked about this. So going back to my video last week, if you want to, if you're curious really about this, go back to those videos where it talks about it. But child labor is becoming problematic, and so like legislation ends up getting passed to prevent that. And again, I did an entire video on working conditions, so please watch that. So I don't have to talk too much. I just want to like refresh it. Companies forced people into these brutal conditions, and children, everyone, and it's not good. In terms of there's a ton more work-related accidents. There's a lot more hours they have to work. There's no sick leave. There's nothing that's going to benefit really the worker as much as, with the exception of there's lots of jobs. Um, so the big difference I would say between the first industrial revolution and this one, well, there's a ton of changes, but the big one is like the average person actually starts to see huge shifts in their life. Like the first one kind of happens, and like yeah, besides like the shift from your rural areas to your urban areas, which is like a huge shift. There's not, like, average people are kind of just like, well, my life kind of got suckier because there's more coal in the environment, and now I'm dealing with that. But your second industrial revolution has some big changes, like railroad transportation of people. You have sewing machines, skyscrapers start to become a thing. And by skyscrapers, I'm not talking like when you go downtown and you see the Columbia Tower that's 77 stories tall, and you're like, wow, like that. No, we're talking like skyscrapers that's like 6, 7, 8 stories tall, which is a skyscraper for this time, right? There's communication networks. People are able to actively communicate across the country, and there is a lack of household production. So your lack of individuals creating product, and you don't really see a shift until the Etsy movement, right? But that's kind of the big thing. So like you have impacts of the industrial revolution on. So I'm talking about the first and second one here. Um, New economic systems, again, I did an entire video on that one, so please, if you're confused about that one, go watch that video. New technologies and innovations, again, we're talking about the. So I should have like prefaced this, but um, new technologies like the spinning jenny, like the Bessemer process, like the how to produce things like your Henry Ford Model T on the assembly line. And then third is your shift from rural to urban life. Again, that's like goes back to the first one. And then the one of the big outcomes of this is imperialism. We will talk about that in the next unit, really. But in Britain's not a very large island; it's tiny. They start to run out of goods, right? So you have to look elsewhere. So where do you look? Well, you can't Britain can't really go to Germany to get it, or well, what is modern day Germany, right? They have to go where the availability is of lands to them, or where they know that they can get goods and services. Well, not services. They can get raw materials, raw goods, and so they're looking specifically at Africa. We're going to be really talking about the impact of Africa. So going back, I want to talk about the Industrial Revolution is impacting economically, socially, and culturally. So you have technology changes like new materials like steel. You have new energy like petroleum, which plays a huge role in the 20th century, the 1900s. New machines are starting to play a role. You have transportation, the factory system. So you're like your division of labor. Certain people are doing certain things day in and day out because they're getting really good at it to reduce the costs of goods to increase the amount of people that can have them. And then science is entering industry, and again, going back to the Bessemer process. And then non-industry is also impacted, like economic changes, like wealth distribution. More people are having access to money. More people are having access to banking, into those types of systems. Political changes, again, going down to imperialism, you're going to see some political changes there. You're going to see some political impacts of it. And sweeping societal changes, like cities, are a huge thing. So there's a lot that the Industrial Revolution has done. And there's a lot of impact that you can, like the Industrial Revolution really impacts imperialism, which really impacts world wars, and it really impacts the world wars. It impacts how people view Africa today. It impacts all that. So there's a lot of, like, as I always talk about dominoes falling, like when you flick a domino and they're in a row, like you're not going to see the 100th domino fall until all the other 99 have tilted, right? So why do we care today about the impacts of, like, the differences between Afghanistan and Pakistan and India? Like why are there conflicts there? Well, to understand those conflicts, you have to understand why those certain countries are, like, who's in those countries and how those countries are impacted. Well, to understand that, you kind of have to understand, like, going back to imperialism and why do we there, like and I say we, I mean, like, why is Britain there? Well, then you go back to Industrial Revolution, right? So to understand certain things now, you have to go hundreds of years back. So that's why we care about history, and that's why we care about the Industrial Revolution. So that's it today. Please let me know if you have any questions. Please let me know if you are confused about anything. Again, I sent out that survey, so please take that so that I can get better at these. Because again, I'm still learning. I'm still trying to get better. I'm still trying to help y'all. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, just let me know. And I'll try to put more of these videos out if they're continuing to be helpful. So anyway, stay safe, social distance, do y'all part so that I can get back to actually teaching y'all in class because I miss y'all. So anyway, have a great day, and I'll talk to you later. Mr. Hicks is